Welcome to the Balanced Scorecard, a strategic management system. This is the second of 4 videos. First video was on COVID and the Balanced Scorecard. The second video was on the strategy map. Third video is reinventing Best Buy. And the fourth video is innovation. We'll be looking through the eyes of the Drucker Institute and looking at companies what the Drucker Institute regards as the most effective. And we'll be looking at the Balanced Scorecard in the context of innovation. In the first video, we look at how the coronavirus is already rewriting the future of business by Dina Gerdeman at the Harvard Business School. She surveyed many Harvard professors, and they came up with numerous observations about what the impact of the pandemic is going to be on American business. We just talked briefly about it in the first video. We're going to talk briefly about it again in this video, talking about trust-based cultures being very important. Customers will have to be helpful in the new environment. They will have to help with a better business outcome. Remote work will have to become more strategic. Both asynchronous and synchronous communications will become essential. Creative teaming will become the norm. Well, teams will be created in remote locations, and they will have to continue to work on a remote basis. Standard operating practices in a new environment. It's highly likely that some of the old practices from the Great Recession from 2008 and 2009 will be expanded in the new environment with the pandemic. Supply chain will become more difficult. Kaufman has talked about how many companies will have to go deeper into the supply chain layers to really understand where everything is coming from. Best leaders will break out of silos. Cantor talked about how companies will have to break out of silos to access more resources to problem solve some of their environments in the new pandemic. Employees and buildings will be healthier. This is talking about how companies will be putting temperature readers on door entrances, filters on new filtration systems on buildings, and a variety of other changes to improve the quality of the health environment in the new normal. So these are just among some of the items that we're talking about in the new environment with the new pandemic, all of which will carry over to the Balanced Scorecard. And now we're going to be talking about the strategy map. A strategy map is a cause and effect diagram that describes how an organization creates customer value. Let's begin to drill down into the strategy map. To begin, we have the 4 layers: financial layer, the customer perspective layer, the internal business process layer, the learning and growth perspective layer, and the various, there's a focal point, there is the trigger point, there is the distinctive objectives, or points of differentiation, and there are the weights of the connections, or the weight of the relationships, and we're going to dig deeper now into the strategy map. There are 5 types of conditions to consider in a structural analysis: the strength of ties, orphan objectives, focal points, trigger points, and distinctive objectives. The strength of ties are the causal links between the strategic objectives and can be qualified as strong, moderate, or weak. We are continuing our drill down into the strategy map for chipset, and let's look at some examples in the strategy map. Let's look at the develop employee process skill, and look at the heavy connection between that and the improved manufacturing and business process strategy point in the strategy map. And you look at that connection to this relationship to the improved manufacturing quality and productivity. So you can see that the connection between process skills and ultimately improved manufacturing quality and productivity are very important. And you can see that ultimately we're looking at a point of differentiation in the strategy map for chipset. So the strength of the relationships that we just talked about, here we have a moderate one, here we have a heavy one, and here we have a dotted line relationship. The dotted line relationship essentially means that it's a weak connection between the follow-up service call and improved post-sales service. It means that chipset could probably eliminate the follow-up service call, and it would not make a big difference to the improved post-sales service. Just a minute ago, we talked about the post-sales service call, and in the strategy map for chipset, this was a orphan objective. An orphan objective is a strategic objective with only weak ties leading out of it to other strategic objectives. It essentially means that if chipset wanted to reduce the budget and reallocate those resources to more important objectives, it would probably be a good choice to look at the post-sales service call. We're going to look at the follow-up service call one more time. And if you look at the service call, you'll note that this is a very weak connection. And you'll note that this is a very much stronger connection between the improved post-sales service and to improve manufacturing and business processes. Now we're going to look at focal points, and a focal point is a strategic objective that has many other links funneling into it. Now we're going to look at focal points, and we're going to look at several key and very important focal points to chipset. So let's take a look at this particular focal point, improved manufacturing and business processes. It has 1, 2, 3, 4 items coming in to improve manufacturing and business processes. 2 of these have very heavy connections, develop employee process skill, and enhance information system capabilities. Here's another very important focal point, improve manufacturing quality and productivity. And you can note that, but just between this item and this item, these are 2 very important focal points for the organization. It means that you want to have high visibility, you want to have excellent management, and you want to have adequate budget resources in these focal points of the organization. Now there's other focal points in the organization. Very importantly, we have grow operating income, and we have align employee and organization goals, and these are all, and we have increased customer satisfaction. So again, these are all very important to the enterprise and how well it performs. We just looked at focal points. Now we're going to look at trigger points. A trigger point is the strategic objective where many ties spur out from it, resulting in the achievement of many other strategic objectives. Let's look at the trigger point for chipset. It's relatively important in the whole scheme of things. There it is, right in the middle of many activities. And you'll note that it has strong connections going out to improve manufacturing quality and productivity, Also has other connections going to reduce delivery time, meet specified delivery dates, improve post-sales service. And you also notice that for these particular items that we just talked about, and this one, they fall heavily on increased customer satisfaction. And that ties to increased market share, and that ultimately goes to grow operating income. So for this particular trigger point, it has many primary and secondary effects, and eventually goes all the way up to grow operating income. There are two distinctive objectives that CHIP set. Those are the strategic objectives that distinguish an organization from its competitors, and they are called distinctive objectives. So let's look at them again here, and let's talk about what makes them important at ChipSet. There are two distinctive objectives at ChipSet. Let's take a quick look at them again. ChipSet decided early on in its corporate strategy that it would be better off to lead in manufacturing controls and quality control, and to build a cost leadership position in the industry and allow others in the industry to differentiate themselves by allowing their competitors to take niche positions in the semiconductor business. So what ChipSet decided to do was to really build the strategic focal points to improve manufacturing quality and productivity, and that included improved manufacturing and business processes at ChipSet. What the balanced scorecard does, it really builds a way of translating an organization's mission and strategy into a set of performance measures, and provides a framework for implementing a strategy. It's really a way of looking at the cause and effect relationships in the organization, and it begins to highlight some parts of the organization being relatively more important than others, and how those parts of the organization ultimately impact the financial objectives of the enterprise. The balanced scorecard also talks very clearly about the non-financial objectives, and those non-financial objectives are laid out in future tense. And that becomes very important for an organization to be able to look at and to be able to help communicate how that organization should behave going forward. Peter Drucker was one of the most iconic business professors of the last 2 decades, and after his passing, the Drucker Institute, which is part of the Claremont graduate program in Claremont, California, developed a management top 250 ranking, and that's published in the Wall Street Journal every year. What this top 250 ranking does, it develops a list of criteria, and it develops an overall measure of corporate effectiveness. And we're going to look at this because it begins to identify what the Drucker Institute believes are the most important measures of overall corporate effectiveness. And that does impact the balanced scorecard. And we're going to look at that in video number 4 in more detail. But let's take a look at it now, because it kind of sets the stage of what we're going to be looking at in both video 3 and video 4, more heavily in video 4, but it gives us a point of transition of where we are going in this discussion. So let's now look at the Drucker Institute rating of 250 companies in the United States. This is published in 2019, a little bit over a year old, but still very important, and I think still relatively pertinent to the discussion we're having in this 4-part video. So let's take a look at the various criteria that the Drucker Institute used to rate companies in the United States. So the first item was customer satisfaction. That's high on our balanced scorecard. As you know, it's the second layer. Employee engagement. That's number 4 in our layers of the balanced scorecard. Innovation is in the third layer of internal business process perspective. Social responsibility, that was another important point within the Drucker Institute. Financial strength, which is our top layer in the balanced scorecard. And then the overall rating of effectiveness according to the Drucker Institute of the top 250 companies in the United States. And when you look at the ratings overall, you'll see that Amazon, Microsoft, and Apple are 1, 2, and 3. And you'll also note the most important item on the list that we just looked at is innovation, 212 for Amazon, 102 for Microsoft, and 100 for Apple. And this correlates with the overall effectiveness of 120, 97, and 92. So this gives us a sense of what the Drucker Institute looks at in terms of overall effectiveness of the top 250 companies. We've just finished the discussion on the strategy map and the balanced scorecard. Now we're going to move on to reinventing Best Buy. And we finished off video 2 with a quick discussion about innovation and its role on the balanced scorecard. We're going to dig deeper into that whole broader topic of innovation and the balanced scorecard in video number 4. And after we looked at video number 3, which is how Hubert Joly turned around Best Buy between 2012 and 2017.